Allahu Akbar to everybody joining us from around the world. Welcome, welcome, dear friends. It is session 7 of the Dawnbreakers, the greatest story ever told, ladies and gentlemen. Last session, we know that the letters of the living had met the Bab. We know that Tahireh hadn't met the Bab, but she gave a letter to her brother-in-law, Mirza Muhammad Ali Ghazvini. Some people were very jealous about the fact that Tahireh was the letter of the living, and they tried to speak to the Bab and say to the Bab, look, stop her being so powerful and the rest of it, please stop her, we don't like all of this stuff. The Bab says, Baha'u'llah has given her the title, Tahireh, the pure one. What am I to say? The Bab tells Mullah Hussein that he's going to choose Quddus on his upcoming pilgrimage. He also tells Mullah Hussein that he's going to meet someone unspeakably glorious, that he's essentially going to meet Baha'u'llah. He also then says to Mullah Hussein that he will be martyred. And then he sends them on a journey. The journey that he's going to send Mullah Hussein on is from Shiraz to Isfahan, Kashan, Qom, Tehran, and then all the way from Mashhad, and then he's going to go to Najaf. This is the mission that's set out for Mullah Hussein by His Holiness, the Bab. Then what's coming up next? We hear about Bastami, and the Bab says to Bastami, you are going to be the first one who's actually going to leave, the first letter of the living that's going to leave. And I need you to travel from Shiraz over here across to Karbala and Najaf. We then learnt about the story encountering Mullah Ali Bastami, a very sad story. Around the center is a guy named Abdul Wahab. Abdul Wahab's in his shop. He falls asleep. He has a dream in which he sees the town crier saying that the Imam Ali is there and he's giving out these leaflets and sharing things with people. He then wakes up from the dream. He sees the town crier. He runs after only to see Mullah Ali Bastami. When he sees Mullah Ali Bastami, he's blown away. He goes and listens nearby, only to hear Mullah Ali Bastami whispering something to someone. This person responds, never! It would be easier for me to enter hellfire than to believe this truth. As a result, Abdul Wahab goes up to him and says, look, what's going on? I believe I want to follow you. Ali Bastami says, please leave me, don't follow me. Abdul Wahab ends up following him. As a result, his father, Abdul Majid, comes with a club and beats him senseless. Afterwards, the story is explained to Abdul Majid by his son Abdul Wahab, and he feels profound regret until in Baghdad, Baha'u'llah forgives him. Bastami then continues heading up to Karbala. Whilst in Najaf, he meets somebody by the name of Sheikh Muhammad Hassan. Now, he is one of the highest, if not the highest, ecclesiastical leader in the whole of Shia Islam. And he starts sharing the faith. Sheikh Muhammad Hassan has a choice where he can accept the blinding truth that's in front of him. However, he decides that he's going to go against it. He's then sent to Baghdad. From there, there's a trial that takes place. And we have someone by the name of Haji Hashem who recounts the trial in which the Mufti addresses Mullah Ali Bastami in horrible terms. He says, you wrecker of Islam, blah, 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 before he even speaks to him. Haji Hashem says, why do you even speak to him like this when you don't know the truth? Lo and behold, we know Mullah Ali Bastami is sent all the way up here to Constantinople, to Istanbul. We believe he died in some sort of concentration camp or was murdered. We don't know exactly what happened to him. Then we went on to the address of the Bab to the letters of the living, one of my favorite pieces of writing, which is at the end of chapter 3. The Bab says to them, essentially, this is the time for you to purge your hearts, to imbibe, absorb, and impart. You must live it. It's time for deeds and not words. You must absolutely be the embodiment of the teachings, the embodiment of sacrifice, of humility. They are told to go out, spread the message across Iran, and when 361 believers then finally believe, the Bab will then, and only then, go on his pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. The reason it's 361 is because of this word, kula shay, which means encompassing all things, and it has the abjad value that I keep talking about, which is 361. So it's symbolic. He says, I won't go on pilgrimage until the 361 people come. Ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much ties up chapter 3. We are now ready to go on to chapter 4. Are there any questions before we do so?
Dave, just a quick comment here. You know what the Bab gave to Mullah Hussein? He said, we will have 19 Wahids, each having 19 names. And not until you give me the list of these names, not until that time arrives, then will I set on pilgrimage, right?
Yeah, 19 Wahids.
Wahids. So you know, we've been having a few seminars about statistics here in Belgium, and it's very interesting because many times they just refer to that passage from the Dawnbreakers, to say that keeping lists, as we are doing, to really systematize our teaching efforts, is a habit that goes back all the way from the very inception of our faith, and that was started by the beloved Bob himself. And so it's very interesting to make the link, and whenever we are thinking about the souls we want to teach, to also think that writing the names down is important to keep track of them, and it's something that was done already back in the days by the Bob himself.
Thank you for your point there, Roxana. Thank you very much.
With these noble words ringing in his ears, Mullah Hussein embarked upon his perilous enterprise. Wherever he went, to whatever class of people he addressed himself, he delivered fearlessly and without reserve the message with which his beloved master had entrusted him. Arriving in Esfahan, he established himself in the Madraseh Nimawar. Around him gathered those who on his previous visit to that city had known him as the favored messenger of Sayyid Kazim to the eminent Mujtahid Haji Sayyid Muhammad Baqir. He, now being dead, had been succeeded by his son, who had just returned from Najaf and was now established upon the seat of his father. Haji Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi had also fallen seriously ill and was on the verge of death. The disciples of the late Haji Sayyid Muhammad Baqir, now freed from the restraining influence of their departed teacher and alarmed at the strange doctrines which Mullah Hussein was propounding, vehemently denounced him to Haji Sayyid Asadullah, the son of the late Haji Sayyid Muhammad Baqir. Mullah Hussein, they complained, was able in the course of his last visit to win the support of your illustrious father to the cause of Sheikh Ahmad. No one among the Sayyid's helpless disciples dared to oppose him. He now comes as the upholder of a still more formidable opponent and is pleading his cause with still greater vehemence and vigor. He is persistently claiming that he whose cause he now champions is the revealer of a book which is divinely inspired and which bears a striking resemblance to the tone and language of the Quran. In the face of the people of this city, he has flung these challenging words, "Produce one like it if you are men of truth." The day is fast approaching when the whole of Esfahan will have embraced his cause. Haji Sayyid Asadullah returned evasive answers to their complaints. What am I to say? He was at last forced to reply. Do you not yourselves admit that Mullah Hussein has, by his eloquence and the cognancy of his argument, silenced a man no less great than my illustrious father? How can I then, who am so inferior to him in merit and knowledge, presume to challenge what he has already approved? Let each man dispassionately examine these claims. If he be satisfied, well and good. If not, let him observe silence and not incur the risk of discrediting the fair name of our faith. Finding that their efforts had failed to influence Haji Sayyid Asadullah, his disciples referred the matter to Haji Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi. Woe betide us, they loudly protested, for the enemy has risen to disrupt the holy faith of Islam. In lurid and exaggerated language, they stressed the challenging character of the ideas propounded by Mullah Hussein. Hold your peace, replied Haji Muhammad Ibrahim. Mullah Hussein is not the person to be duped by anyone, nor can he fall a victim to dangerous heresies. If your contention be true, if Mullah Hussein has indeed espoused a new faith, it is unquestionably your first obligation to ensure dispassionately into the character, or to inquire dispassionately into the character of his teachings, and to refrain from denouncing him without previous and careful scrutiny. If my health and strength be restored, it is my intention, God willing, to investigate the matter myself and to ascertain the truth. This severe rebuke pronounced by Haji Kalwasi greatly disconcerted the disciples of Haji Sayyid Asadullah. In their dismay, they appealed to Manud Sher Khan, the Mutamid-Dawleh, the governor of the city. That wise and judicious ruler refused to interfere in these matters, which he said fell exclusively within the jurisdiction of the ulamas. He warned them to abstain from mischief and to cease disturbing the peace and tranquility of the messenger. His trenchant words shattered the hopes of the mischief makers. Mullah Hussein was thereby relieved from the machinations of his enemies and for a time pursued untrammeled the course of his labors.
Mullah Hussein has now returned. He's gone from Shiraz. He's headed up to Isfahan, where previously he had met Haji Muhammad Baghir, this very eminent ecclesiastical leader who had espoused the cause of the Shaykhis and given it support. Mullah Hussein is now returning. His son, who's in charge, is Haji Sayyid Asadullah. So this is the son that's in charge. Now, when he goes to meet him, a lot of the disciples who were not very happy with what was going on went to Asadullah and said, look, please, can you stop? Mullah Hussein's back, and he managed to trick your father and like, do something. Like he's talking about this cause, this promised one coming, this Qa'im. Haji Sayyid Asadullah says, if someone like my father, who was so much smarter than me, could accept this, how can I say anything? These people are very frustrated and they don't know where to turn. They then go to Haji Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi. Now, Haji Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi, the Dawnbreakers doesn't particularly explain who he is, but through research and through speaking to Dr. Fanon Abhazir, we kind of find out that Haji Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi, his family, they're part of the ecclesiastical order, but they're very fair-minded people. They're very sort of just people. So he goes to him, and this second character, Haji Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi, he also says, look, I don't see what's wrong with this. I'm too weak to actually go and investigate. If I was well enough, I would have gone, but let's stop creating trouble. Still, they're not happy. They then go to the governor of Isfahan, someone by the name of Manud Sher Khan, and they go to him and say, look, please stop Mullah Hussein. He's spreading all those heretical things and the rest of it. Manud Sher Khan, a very fair man, says, look, this is not something for me to pronounce upon. This is something for the ecclesiastics to discuss. And then they are very, very much upset. The mischief makers who are trying to cause some problems, trying to do something, anywhere they turn, they're being shut down.
The first to embrace the cause of the Bab in that city was a man, a sifter of wheat, who as soon as the call reached his ears, unreservedly accepted the message. With marvelous devotion, he served Mullah Hussein, and through his close association with him, became a zealous advocate of the new revelation. A few years later, when the soul-stirring details of the siege of the fort of Sheikh Tabarsi were being recounted to him, he felt an irresistible impulse to throw in his lot with those heroic companions of the Bab who had risen for the defense of their faith. Carrying his sieve in his hand, he immediately arose and set out to reach the scene of that memorable encounter. Why leave so hurriedly? His friends asked him, as they saw him running in a state of intense excitement through the bazaars of Isfahan. I have risen, he replied, to join the glorious company of the defenders of the fort of Sheikh Tabarsi. With this sieve which I carry with me, I intend to sift the people in every city through which I pass. Whomsoever I find ready to espouse this cause I have embraced, I will ask to join me and hasten forthwith to the field of martyrdom. Such was the devotion of this youth that the Bab in the Persian Bayan refers to him in such terms. Esfahan, that outstanding city, is distinguished by the religious fervor of its Shia inhabitants, by the learning of its divines, and by the keen expectation shared by high and low alike of the imminent coming of the Sahib-o-Zaman. In every quarter of that city, religious institutions have been established. And yet, when the messenger of God had been made manifest, they who claimed to be the repositories of learning and the expounders of the mysteries of the faith of God rejected his message. Of all the inhabitants of that seat of learning, only one person, a sifter of wheat, was found to recognize the truth and was invested with the robe of divine virtue.
So this story is so powerful to me. This sifter of wheat, this is his whole job, is just sifting wheat. And like a DJ, you probably don't need to be the smartest person in the world to sift wheat or to DJ. Similar sorts of things where we sift through songs and watch people dance. So he comes across Mullah Hussein. He's very tightly associated with Mullah Hussein. And he falls absolutely in love with the revelation. The spirit, it just speaks to him so much. So much so that we know later on, when there's going to be this battle that takes place, one of the three major battles in Mazandaran, in this province in the north, of Fort Sheikh Tabasi, when he finds out, still with his sifter in his hand, he starts running. And people say to him, where are you going? You've got wheat to sift. He says, no. I've got much more important things to do. He's going to effectively become a martyr, and this is what he does, to go and stand with his Baha'i brothers and sisters representing the truth in the Battle of Fort Sheikh Tabasi. Also, what's interesting here is that you'll find the sifter of wheat, he's mentioned in the mother book of the Baha'i revelation. He's mentioned in the Persian Bayan, and he's mentioned in the mother book of the Baha'i dispensation, in the Agdas. And it's interesting, this juxtaposition. You have someone as kind of powerful and erudite as Sheikh Muhammad Hassan, the one who caused Bastami to be sent to Constantinople. This guy, had he accepted the faith, this cleric who was so well, arguably the highest position in Iran and could have influenced a lot of the leaders, he, with all his erudition and all his knowledge, he turned down the cause. Yet this sifter of wheat mentions it, and it's in the mother book of the Babi dispensation and of the Baha'i dispensation. Knowledge can be a barrier.
Among the Sayyids of Esfahan, a few such as Mirza Muhammad Ali Nahri, whose daughter was subsequently joined in wedlock with the most great branch, Mirza Hadi, the brother of Mirza Muhammad Ali, and Mirza Muhammad Rezai Paghlayi, recognized the truth of the cause. Mullah Sadegh Khurasani, formerly known as Muqaddas and surnamed by Baha'u'llah Ismail Astagh, and according to the instructions of Sayyid Kazem, had during the last 5 years been residing in Esfahan and had been preparing the way for the advent of the new revelation, was also among the first believers who identified themselves with the message proclaimed by the Bab. As soon as he learned of the arrival of Mullah Hussein in Esfahan, he hastened to meet him. He gives the following account of his first interview, which took place at night in the home of Mirza Muhammad Ali Nahri. I asked Mullah Hussein to divulge the name of him whom claimed to be the promised manifestation. He replied, "To inquire about that name and to divulge it are alike forbidden." Would it then be possible, I asked, for me, even as the letters of the living, to seek independently the grace of the All-Merciful and through prayer to discover his identity? The door of his grace, he replied, is never closed in the face of him who seeks to find him. I immediately retired from his presence and requested his host to allow me the privacy of a room in his house where alone and undisturbed I could commune with God. In the midst of my contemplation, I suddenly remembered the face of a youth whom I had often observed while in Karbala, standing in an attitude of prayer, with his face bathed with tears at the entrance of the shrine of the Imam Hussein. That same countenance now reappeared before my eyes. In my vision, I seemed to behold that same face, those same features, expressive of such joy as I could never describe. He smiled as he gazed at me. I went towards him, ready to throw myself at his feet. I was bending towards the ground when, lo, that radiant figure vanished from before me. Overpowered with joy and gladness, I ran out to meet Mullah Hussein, who with transport received me and assured me that I had at last attained the object of my desire. He bade me, however, repress my feelings. Declare not your vision to anyone, he urged me. The time for it has not yet arrived. You have reaped the fruit of your patient waiting in Esfahan. You should now proceed to Kerman and there acquaint Haji Mirza Karim Khan with this message. From that place you should travel to Shiraz and endeavor to rouse the people of that city from their heedlessness. I hope to join you in Shiraz and share with you the blessings of a joyous reunion with our beloved. From Esfahan, Mullah Hussein proceeded to Kashan. The first to be enrolled in that city among the company of the faithful was a certain Haji Mirza Jani, surnamed Parpa, who was a merchant of note. Among the friends of Mullah Hussein was a well-known divine, Sayyid Abdul Baghi, a resident of Kashan and a member of the Shaykhi community. Although intimately associated with Mullah Hussein during his stay in Najaf and Karbala, the Sayyid felt unable to sacrifice rank and leadership for the message which his friend had brought him. Arriving in Qom, Mullah Hussein found its people utterly unprepared to heed his call. The seeds he sowed among them did not germinate until the time when Baha'u'llah was exiled to Baghdad. In those days, Haji Mirza Musa, a native of Qom, embraced the faith, journeyed to Baghdad, and there met Baha'u'llah. He eventually quaffed the cup of martyrdom in his path. From Qom, Mullah Hussein proceeded directly to Tehran. He lived during his stay in the capital in one of the rooms which belonged to the madrasa of Mirza Saleh, better known as the madrasa of Peye Minar. Haji Mirza Mohammad Khorasani, the leader of the Shaykhi community in Tehran, who acted as an instructor in that institution, was approached by Mullah Hussein but failed to respond to his motivation to accept the message. We had cherished the hope, he said to Mullah Hussein, that after the death of Sayyid Kazem, he would strive to promote the best interests of the Shaykhi community and would not deliver it from the obscurity into which it has sunk. You seem to, however, have betrayed its cause. You have shattered our fondest expectations. If you persist in disseminating these subversive doctrines, you will eventually extinguish the remnants of the Shaykhis in the city. Mullah Hussein assured him that he had no intention of prolonging his stay in Tehran, that his aim was in no wise to abase or suppress the teachings inculcated by Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazem. During his stay in Tehran, Mullah Hussein each day would leave his room early in the morning and would return to it only an hour after sunset. Upon his return, he would quietly and alone re-enter his room, close the door behind him, and remain in the privacy of his cell until the next day. Mirza Musa Aghaya Kalim, the brother of Baha'u'llah, recounted to me the following. I have heard Mullah Muhammad Mu'alem, a native of Nur in the province of Mazandaran, who was a fervent admirer of both Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazem, relate this story. I was in those days recognized as one of the favored disciples of Haji Mirza Muhammad and lived in the same school which he taught. My room adjoined his room, and we were closely associated together. On the day he was engaged in discussion with Mullah Hussein, I overheard their conversation from beginning to end and was deeply affected by the ardor, the fluency, and the learning of that youthful stranger. I was surprised at his evasive answers, the arrogant and contemptuous behavior of Haji Mirza Muhammad. That day I felt strongly attracted by the charm of that youth and deeply resented the unseemly conduct of my teacher towards him. I concealed my feelings, however, and pretended to ignore his discussions with Mullah Hussein. I was seized with a passionate desire to meet the latter and ventured at the hour of midnight to visit him. He did not expect me, but I knocked at his door and found him awake, seated beside his lamp. He received me affectionately and spoke to me with extreme courtesy and tenderness. I unburdened my heart to him, and as I was addressing him, tears which I could not repress flowed from my eyes. I can now see, he said, the reason why I have chosen to dwell in this place. Your teacher has contemptuously rejected this message and despised its author. My hope is that his pupil may, and like his master, recognize its truth. What is your name, and which city is your home? My name, I replied, is Mullah Muhammad, and my surname Mu'alem. My home is Nur in the province of Mazandaran. Tell me, further inquired Mullah Hussein, is there today among the family of the late Mirza Bozorg Nuri, who was so renowned for his character, his charm, and artistic and intellectual attainments, anyone who has proved himself capable of maintaining the high traditions of that illustrious house? Yea, I replied. Among his sons now living, one has distinguished himself by the very traits which characterized his father, by his virtuous life, his high attainments, his loving kindness and liberality. He has proved himself a noble descendant of a noble father. What is his occupation? He asked me. He cheers the disconsolate and feeds the hungry, I replied. What of his rank and position? He has none, I said, apart from befriending the poor and the stranger. What is his name? Hussein Ali. In which of the scripts of his father does he excel? His favorite script is Shikaste Nastaliq. How does he spend his time? He roams the woods and delights in the beauties of the countryside. What is his age? 8 and 20. The eagerness with which Mullah Hussein questioned me and the sense of delight which he welcomed every particular I gave him greatly surprised me. Turning to me, and with his face beaming with satisfaction and joy, he once more inquired, I presume you often meet him? I frequently visit his home, I replied. Will you, he said, deliver into his hands a trust from me? Most assuredly, was my reply. He then gave me a scroll wrapped in a piece of cloth and requested me to hand it to him the next day at the hour of dawn. Should he deign to answer me, he added, will you be kind enough to acquaint me with his reply? I received the scroll from him, and at the break of day arose to carry out his desire.
Thank you very much, Rayan. We'll pause just there. We start to learn about Mirza Muhammad Ali Nehri, who we know to be the father-in-law of Abdul Baha. The first person to declare is my great-great-grandfather, a guy named Haji Mirza Jania Kashani, an amazing man, a very handsome man, I'm told, who was told his grandchildren would be supremely handsome and intelligent. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. This is a guy that he meets in Kashan. We know there's someone by the name of Sayyid Abdullah Baghi, who's a very erudite man, meets Mullah Hussein in the house of my great-granddad, but doesn't decide to bite. He goes up to Qom and then he heads to Tehran, and he's in this school, and Mullah Hussein's there in the school, and he's trying to teach the people in the school about what's happened. But the person who's in charge, Haji Mirza Muhammad, Mullah Hussein, he stands up, he's very eloquent in speech, presents things forward, and I say, yeah, we know you're a follower of Sheikh Ahmad and Said Kazim. We were hoping you'd take the more sort of normal road of it's good, it's going to happen in the future. Let's just chill. Let's just have a bit of shisha together and all relax. And he says, no, but the promised one has come. And they're like, yeah, I promise, yeah, this is cool. Let's play a bit of tack there, a bit of backgammon. And he's like, what are you talking? He's like, fine. Okay, cool. You guys chill. I'm going. So he then goes to sleep. Some of these details are not on the Dawn Breakers, by the way. There is a bit of poetic license being exercised here. So he then goes back, and then a student of Haji Mirza Muhammad hears all of this. And then he goes and finds Mullah Hussein, and he says to Mullah Hussein, I'm interested in what you're saying. Tell me what you're saying. So this is when they have a conversation between the two of them. Mullah Mu'alem is really kind of engrossed in the story. And then a very bizarre things happen. Where are you from? He says, oh, I'm from Mazandaran, I'm from Nur. He says, interesting. Okay, you're from the Nur region. Okay, so do you know Mirza Bozorg Nuri, who we know to be Baha'u'llah's dad? And he says, yes. And then he says, is there anyone, amongst the family, any descendants from them that are outstanding? And he says, well, actually, yes, there's this one person, Mirza Hussein Ali. And then he says, right, what's his occupation? And he says, well, he cheers the poor, and, then what about his rank and position? He says, well, yeah, he just sort of helps people out. And then he asks the question, what's his favourite script? So we know that different writing in Farsi, you can have different scripts that you could write in, like the calligraphy, and I think Shikaste is his favourite one. So there are all these questions that Mullah Hussein's asking him, seemingly really randomly. And then he says to him, I have this scroll, and he gives him the scroll in a cloth. And he says, I want you to go and deliver this to this youth. How old is he? He says, well, he says 28 years old. He says, yes, take this and go and deliver it to this youth. So that's what's happening. Now, why did Mullah Hussein know this information? Was there something that Sayyid Kazim had told him, or something that the Bab had said, you need to find this person? Or was it the same sort of spirit that permeated through him when he was going to look for the Bab? When he went to find the Bab, remember, he prayed for 40 days, he went down to Bushir, and then as if drawn by a magnet, went to Shiraz. Something was telling him, was it that he was just so spiritually in tune? And the bigger question is, Does that mean we can do the same?
A couple of pages back. It's a title that was said. Oh goodness, my cook is my cleaner is putting the house down.
Sandra, but perhaps I don't want you to burn alive. Maybe deal with that, and then we'll come back to your question.
It's a title that was mentioned, but I couldn't catch it. It started with, it was either it's something with an S. Saburi.
Sahaba Zaman, was that?
Yes, that's it. What does that mean?
Sahaba Zaman refers to a Lord of the Age. That refers to the Bab, basically.
Thank you.
That's the title for the Bab. Sandra there, as you see, is on fire with the love of God, that she's setting off her smoke alarms. Incredible woman. Incredible woman. This is what we all should be, slowly, but please be careful in your homes.
As I approached the house of Baha'u'llah, I recognized his brother Mirza Musa, who was standing at the gate and to whom I communicated the object of my visit. He went into the house and soon reappeared, bearing a message of welcome. I was ushered into his presence and presented the scroll to Mirza Musa, who laid it before Baha'u'llah. He bade us both be seated. Unfolding the scroll, he glanced at its contents and began to read aloud to us certain of its passages. I sat enraptured as I listened to the sound of his voice and the sweetness of its melody. He had read a page of the scroll when, turning to his brother, he said, "Musa, what have you to say? Verily I say, whoso believes in the Quran and recognizes its divine origin, and yet hesitates, though it be for a moment, to admit that these soul-stirring words are endowed with the same regenerating power, has most assuredly erred in his judgment and has strayed far from the path of justice." He spoke no more. Dismissing me from his presence, he charged me to take Mullah Hussein as a gift from him, a loaf of Russian sugar and a package of tea, and to convey to him the expression of his appreciation and love.
We are told that Mullah Hussein is going to these cities and he has writings of the Bab. Are you referring to the commentary on the Surah of Joseph? Is that what he's carrying with him?
Good question. From what I understand, we don't know what was in that scroll, actually. It would also be very unlikely that he'd have the full Qayyum al-Azma. The Qayyum al-Azma took 40 days to write. We don't know if it was 40 consecutive days or 40 separate days, but it's likely that he may well have had some of the writings from the Qayyum al-Azma, not the entire thing. But we don't actually know, as far as we're not aware.
Dave, what is this Quram Ashra, please?
The Qayyum al-Azma, do you remember the commentary on the Surah of Joseph? This is the story of the Surah of Joseph when the Bab explains what's going on there. So it's a book known as the Qayyum al-Azma.
I arose and, filled with joy, hastened back to Mullah Hussein and delivered to him the gift and message of Baha'u'llah. With what joy and exultation he received them from me. Words fail me to describe the intensity of his emotion. He started to his feet, received with bowed head the gift from my hand, and fervently kissed it. He then took me in his arms, kissed my eyes, and said, "My dearly beloved friend, I pray that even as you have rejoiced my heart, God may grant you eternal felicity and fill your heart with imperishable gladness." I was amazed at the behavior of Mullah Hussein. What could be, I thought to myself, the nature of the bond that unites these two souls? What could have kindled so fervid a fellowship in their hearts? Why should Mullah Hussein, in whose sight the pomp and circumstance of royalty were the merest trifle, have evinced such gladness at the sight of so inconsiderable a gift from the hands of Baha'u'llah? I was puzzled by this thought and could not unravel its mystery. A few days later, Mullah Hussein left for Khurasan. As he bade me farewell, he said, "Read not to anyone what you have heard and witnessed. Let this be a secret hidden within your breast. Divulge not his name, for they who envy his position will arise to harm him. In your moments of meditation, pray that the Almighty may protect him, that through him he may exalt the downtrodden, enrich the poor, and redeem the fallen. The secret of things is concealed from our eyes. Ours is the duty to raise the call of the new day and to proclaim this divine message unto all people. Many a soul will in this city shed his blood in this path. That blood will water the tree of God, will cause it to flourish and to overshadow all mankind."
Mullah Mu'alim takes this scroll. He goes up to the house of Baha'u'llah He knocks on the door and is greeted by Baha'u'llah's brother, Mirza Musa, Agha Halim. He then says, I would like to see Baha'u'llah, I've got this scroll. And he then comes in and he gives the scroll. Baha'u'llah looks at the scroll and then shows his brother and says to his brother, what do you think of this? Before the brother can respond, he says, this verily has the same truth of the Quran, the style in which it's written, the power of which it's written. He's absolutely finds it remarkable. Or does he find it remarkable? Because it's Baha'u'llah, and he'd know this. But either way, this is the way the story goes, that he sees his writing and he says, I'm absolutely in. He then gives to Mullah Mu'allim a gift. The gift that you've probably given to someone at some point, on Valentine's Day or something, as we all do, a loaf of Russian sugar and some tea, right? That's a very common gift that we probably around the world give each other. In Iran, believe it or not, at the time, these gifts were very rare, and this is what the upper classes would do for each other. They would give tea and Russian sugar. If anyone's got any, I'd like to try some. Anyway, so this gift is given, and Mullah Mu'allim then takes this gift and says, please pass this on to Mullah Hussein. He then goes and sees Mullah Hussein and says, right, well, I went and gave him the scroll, and he's given you some Russian sugar and this tea. Mullah Hussein is ecstatic, so much that he kisses the eyes of Mullah Mu'allim, because he knows who Mullah Mu'allim has just seen. He kisses the eyes because the eyes have beheld Baha'u'llah. How beautiful is this? And he's so ecstatic. And Mullah Mu'allim's thinking, well, calm down. It's just a bit of tea and some sugar. Like, I don't see why you're getting so excited. Wholly unaware of what's taking place. Maybe Mullah Mu'allim's thinking, maybe I should try some of that sugar. But he's absolutely enraptured and he's just so happy. And he says to Mullah Mu'allim, shh, listen, don't tell anybody about what you've witnessed. Don't tell anybody about this. And Mullah Mu'allim's just like, it's just some tea and some sugar, but okay, sure, whatever, calm down. Like, completely unaware of what's actually taking place. But this is where Baha'u'llah is on board. We're now going to look at Baha'u'llah's journey to Mazandaran. So Baha'u'llah was in Tehran and he's journeying up into this province up here, into Mazandaran.
The first journey Baha'u'llah undertook for the purpose of promoting the revelation announced by the Bab was to his ancestral home in Nur, in the province of Mazandaran. He set out for the village of Taqur, the personal estate of his father, where he owned a vast mansion, royally furnished and superbly situated. It was my privilege to hear Baha'u'llah himself one day recount the following. The late Wazir, my father, enjoyed a most enviable position among his countrymen. His vast wealth, his noble ancestry, his artistic attainments, his unrivaled prestige and exalted rank made him the object of the admiration of all who knew him. For a period of over 20 years, no one among the wide circle of his family and kindred, which extended over Nur and Tehran, suffered distress, injury, or illness. They enjoyed during a long and uninterrupted period rich and manifold blessings. Quite suddenly, however, this prosperity and glory gave way to a series of calamities which severely shook the foundations of his material prosperity. The first loss he suffered was occasioned by a great flood, which rising in the mountains of Mazandaran swept with great violence over the village of Taqur and utterly destroyed half the mansion of the vizier, situated above the fortress of that village. The best part of that house, which had been known for the solidity of its foundations, was utterly wiped away by the fury of the roaring torrent. Its precious articles of furniture were destroyed, and its elaborate ornamentation irretrievably ruined. This was shortly followed by the loss of various state positions which the vizier occupied, and by the repeated assaults directed against him by his envious adversaries. Despite this sudden change of fortune, the vizier maintained his dignity and calm, and continued within the restricted limits of his means his acts of benevolence and charity. He continued to exercise towards his faithless associates that same courtesy and kindness that had characterized his dealings with his fellow men. With splendid fortitude, he grappled until the last hour of his life with the adversities that weighed so heavily upon him. Baha'u'llah had already, prior to the declaration of the Bab, visited the district of Nur at a time when the celebrated Mujtahid Mirza Muhammad Taqi an-Nuri was at the height of his authority and influence. Such was the eminence of his position that they who sat at his feet regarded themselves each as the authorized exponent of the faith and law of Islam. The Mujtahid was addressing a company of over 200 of such disciples. and was expatiating upon a dark passage of the reported utterances of the Imams, when Baha'u'llah, followed by a number of his companions, passed by that place and paused for a while to listen to his discourse. The Mujtahid asked his disciples to elucidate an abstruse theory relating to the metaphysical aspects of the Islamic teachings. As they all confessed their inability to explain it, Baha'u'llah was moved to give, in brief but convincing language, a lucid exposition of that theory. The Mujtahid was greatly annoyed at the incompetence of his disciples. "For years I have been instructing you," he angrily exclaimed, "and have patiently striven to instill into your minds the profoundest truths and the noblest principles of the faith. And yet you allow, after all these years of persistent study, this youth, a wearer of the Qullah, who has had no share in scholarly training and who is entirely unfamiliar with your academic learning, to demonstrate his superiority over you?" Later on, when Baha'u'llah had departed, the Mujtahid related to his disciples two of his recent dreams, the circumstances of which he believed were of the utmost significance. "In my first dream," he said, "I was standing in the midst of a vast concourse of people, all of whom seemed to be pointing to a certain house in which they said the Sahibu Zaman dwelt. Frantic with joy, I hastened in my dream to attain his presence. When I reached the house, I was, to my great surprise, refused admittance. The promised Qa'im, I was informed, is engaged in private conversation with another person. Access to them is strictly forbidden. From the guards who were standing beside the door, I gathered that that person was none other than Baha'u'llah. In my second dream," the Mujtahid continued, "I found myself in a place where I beheld around me a number of coffers, each of which it was stated belonged to Baha'u'llah. As I opened them, I found them to be filled with books. Every word and letter recorded in these books was set with the most exquisite jewels. Their radiance dazzled me. I was so overpowered by their brilliance that I awoke suddenly from my dream. When in the year 60 Baha'u'llah arrived in Nur, he discovered that the celebrated Mujtahid, who on his previous visit had wielded such immense power, had passed away. The vast number of his devotees had shrunk into a mere handful of dejected disciples, who under the leadership of his successor, Mullah Muhammad, were striving to uphold the traditions of their departed leader. The enthusiasm which greeted Baha'u'llah's arrival sharply contrasted with the gloom that had settled upon the remnants of that once flourishing community. A large number of the officials and notables in that neighborhood called upon him and, with every mark of affection and respect, accorded him a befitting welcome. They were eager, in view of the social position he occupied, to learn from him all the news regarding the life of the Shah, the activities of his ministers, and the affairs of his government. To their enquiries, Baha'u'llah replied with extreme indifference and seemed to reveal very little interest or concern. With persuasive eloquence, he pleaded the cause of the new revelation and directed their attention to the immeasurable benefits which it was destined to confer upon their country. Those who heard him marveled at the keen interest which a man of his position and age evinced for truths which primarily concerned the divines and theologians of Islam. They felt powerless to challenge the soundness of his arguments or to belittle the cause which he so ably expounded. They admired the loftiness of his enthusiasm and the profundity of his thoughts, and were deeply impressed by his detachment and self-effacement. I'm done. While I was reading this, the dream of this divine was that the words of Baha'u'llah were written in jewels. And this reminded me of a story I heard from the hand of the cause Khadim. There was an occasion in which hand of the cause, Mr. Smundry, had travelled across the United States and had been interviewed by a religious writer about his faith. And in the article, which was a full-page article in many newspapers across the United States, Mr. Samandri was praised by the writer of the article as the return of Peter. The title of the article was Baha'u'llah's Peter. And Mr. Kadem read this article, and in the article, the writer had quoted Mr. Samandri when he said that, yes, but Peter saw the Son, I saw the Father. And Mr. Kadam called Mr. Samandari and said, what you said should be written in the sky in diamonds. This is what moved me because of remembering that episode. But even more touching, Mr. Samandari said, but the writer did not put in there all that I said. I said, I was not worthy to carry the shoes of Peter. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Rick. What a beautiful story, straight from the heart. Very touching indeed. To recap on what's taken place here. We know Baha'u'llah has gone from Tehran. He's headed up to Thakur, which is where his father lived and where he had property. And Baha'u'llah talks a little bit about his father, saying that his father would do anything for anyone. He would look after people. He was always there, very much loved. And then this first test comes along where there's this huge flood. And the flood is so bad, it ends up destroying half the house. Even the part of the house that was known for its strong foundations. You know how we have houses that we say to people, wow, these foundations are strong. This was apparently really known for that. And half his furniture is also damaged in the rest of it. His dad is still so calm to people and so loving. So the way he talks about his father is very beautiful. Mirza Muhammad Taghi Nouri, this eminent mujtahid, he's there. And he's giving this sermon and he asks some questions. And all the disciples are dumbfounded. Baha'u'llah is walking past. And then Baha'u'llah explains something in the most eloquent language, completely blowing the mind of Mirza Muhammad Taghi Nouri, who was then just a bit like, wow, who is this guy? I don't get it. He's not an ecclesiastical guy. He has these two dreams, one of them which touched dear Rick so deeply with the story he then subsequently shared. And he says in the first dream, he sees that everybody is pointing to this house, the house of the Ga'em, the house of the 12th Imam. Everyone's pointing it. So this is Mirza Muhammad Taghi Nouri, this ecclesiastical guy, who's having this dream, and he sees everyone's pointing at the house. And as he gets closer, he wants to go and see, and they say, no, no one can come in. These two are talking. And he says the person that the Ga'em was talking to was none other than that youth that spoke out of my lecture, referring to Baha'u'llah. His second dream was the one where he was surrounded by a bunch of coffers, a bunch of boxes. He then opens up to find the writings of Baha'u'llah written in beautiful gems. Baha'u'llah returns back in the year 60, in the year 1844. Unfortunately, he has now passed away and he's no longer with them. His son, Mullah Muhammad, is the new person, and when Baha'u'llah comes, they're all so excited. They're saying, wow, welcome. And Baha'u'llah is this message to share of the Bab. And I said, yeah, so tell us what's happening. What's the latest? Like, you know, the royal family, is the baby like wearing blue? Is he wearing pink? What's going on? What's the latest gossip? Baha'u'llah's like, not really so interested in that. I've got some news for you. And I said, okay, cool. Well, we've heard there's a horse that's really big now, that's decorated lovely. And he's just like, yeah, I'm not really interested in discussing the state of the affairs. That's not why I'm here. But they just didn't really get it. They were so focused on that. Although they did absolutely admire Baha'u'llah, they just didn't understand why he had all this gossip that he could share from the court of the Shah, why he didn't.
None dared to contend with his views except his uncle Aziz, who ventured to oppose him, challenging his statements and aspersing their truth. When those who heard him sought to silence this opponent and to injure him, Baha'u'llah intervened in his behalf and advised them to leave him in the hands of God. Alarmed, he sought the aid of the mujtahid of Nur, Mullah Muhammad, and appealed to him to lend him immediate assistance. O vicegerent of the Prophet of God, he said, behold what has befallen the faith. A youth, a layman, attired in the garb of nobility, has come to Nur, has invaded the strongholds of orthodoxy and disrupted the holy faith of Islam. Arise and resist his onslaught. Whoever attains his presence falls immediately under his spell and is enthralled by the power of his utterance. I know not whether he is a sorcerer or whether he mixes with his tea some mysterious substance that makes every man who drinks the tea fall a victim to its charm. The mujtahid, notwithstanding his own lack of comprehension, was able to realize the folly of such remarks. Jestingly, he observed, "Have you not partaken of his tea or heard him address his companions?" "I have," he replied, "but thanks to your loving protection, I have remained immune from the effect of his mysterious power." The Mujtahid, finding himself unequal to the task of arousing the populace against Baha'u'llah and of combating directly the ideas which so powerful an opponent was fearlessly spreading, contented himself with a written statement in which he declared, "O Aziz, be not afraid, no one will dare molest you." In writing this, the Mujtahid had, through a grammatical error, so perverted the purport of his statement that those who read it among the notables of the village of Takur were scandalized by its meaning and vilified both the bearer and the author of that statement. Those who attained the presence of Baha'u'llah and heard him expound the message proclaimed by the Bab were so impressed by the earnestness of his appeal that they forthwith arose to disseminate that same message among the people of Noor and to extol the virtues of its distinguished promoter. The disciples of Mullah Muhammad, meanwhile, endeavored to persuade their teacher to proceed to Takur, to visit Baha'u'llah in person, to ascertain from him the nature of this new revelation, and to enlighten his followers regarding its character and purpose. To their earnest entreaty, the Mujtahid returned an evasive answer. His disciples, however, refused to admit the validity of the objections he raised. They urged that the first obligation imposed upon a man of his position, whose function was to preserve the integrity of Shia Islam, was into the nature of every movement that tended to affect the interests of their faith. Mullah Muhammad eventually decided to delegate two of his eminent lieutenants, Mullah Abbas and Mirza Abdul Qasim, both sons-in-law and trusted disciples of the late Mujtahid Mirza Muhammad Taqi, to visit Baha'u'llah and to determine the true character of the message he had brought. He pledged himself to endorse unreservedly whatever conclusions they might arrive at, and to recognize their decision in such matters as final. On being informed of their arrival in Takur, that Baha'u'llah had departed for his winter resort, the representatives of Mullah Muhammad decided to leave for that place. When they arrived, they found Baha'u'llah engaged in revealing a commentary on the opening surah of the Quran, entitled The 7 Verses of Repetition. As they sat and listened to his discourse, the loftiness of the theme, the persuasive eloquence which characterized its presentation, as well as the extraordinary manner of its delivery, profoundly impressed them. Mullah Abbas, unable to contain himself, arose from his seat and, urged by an impulse he could
not resist,
walked back and stood still beside the door in an attitude of reverent submissiveness. The charm of the discourse to which he was listening had fascinated him. "You behold my condition," he told his companion, as he stood trembling with emotion and eyes full of tears. "I am powerless to question Baha'u'llah. The questions I had planned to ask him have vanished suddenly from my memory. You are free either to proceed with your inquiry or to return alone to our teacher and inform him of the state in which I find myself. Tell him from me that Abbas can never again return to him. He can no longer forsake this threshold." Mirza Abu Qasim was likewise moved to follow the example of his companion. "I have ceased to recognize my teacher," was his reply. "This very moment I have vowed to God to dedicate the remaining days of my life to the service of Baha'u'llah, my true and only master." The news of the sudden conversion of the chosen envoys of the Mujtahid of Noor spread with bewildering rapidity throughout the district. It roused the people from their lethargy. Ecclesiastical dignitaries, state officials, traders and peasants all flocked to the residence of Baha'u'llah. A considerable number among them willingly espoused his cause. In their admiration for him, a number of the most distinguished among them remarked, "We see how the people of Noor have risen and rallied around you. We witness on every side evidences of their exaltation. If Mullah Muhammad were also to join them, the triumph of this faith would be completely assured."
I am come to Noor,
Baha'u'llah replied, "solely for the purpose of proclaiming the cause of God. I cherish no other intention. If I were told that at a distance of 100 leagues a seeker yearned for the truth and was unable to meet me, I would gladly and unhesitatingly hasten to his abode, and would myself satisfy his hunger. Mullah Muhammad, I am told, lives in Sadat Abad, a village not far distant from this place. It is my purpose to visit him and deliver to him the message of God."
we learn about Baha'u'llah's uncle, Uncle Azim, who basically had some issues with what Baha'u'llah's espousing. Baha'u'llah's talking about the Ghaim being here. Everyone was okay with this, but Uncle Azim decides to have a bit of problem with this. And he tries to get Mullah Muhammad, who's this mujtahid of Noor, to support him. And they have a message, and he says to him, "Look, I don't know what's happening, but it seems that these Babis are putting something in the tea. You know, they're really trying to convert people and they're trying to brainwash people." So much so, this tea thing, I believe, still exists in Iran. I know my mum, when she was growing up, her best friend would never drink tea at her house, just in case we were trying to poison them with the tea and make people become Babis. By the way, I'm selling tea if anyone's interested. People start hearing of the message that Baha'u'llah is spreading about the Bab, and some of the residents of Noor start espousing the faith as well, and they're like, "Yes, this is great." Then some of the disciples of Mullah Muhammad says, "Do we believe? Surely, Mullah Muhammad, you should go, and why don't you go and meet Baha'u'llah and actually find out if this is true? This is your job." Mullah Muhammad seemed a little bit panicked, and he says, "Well, I mean, I could do, but I've got things to do. Maybe I'll do it another time." And they say, "No, Mullah Muhammad, you have to go and investigate." He says, "Okay, fine. What I'll do is I'll get 2 volunteers. Abbas, Qasim, come here." So he grabs Mullah Abbas and Mullah Qasim, and he says, "Why don't you head down and you figure out if this is true? But yeah, let's just see what happens here." So they head down towards Tahur, and they find that Baha'u'llah's gone to the winter resort. They then go to this winter resort of Baha'u'llah and then find Baha'u'llah engaged in expounding upon this thing in the Quran. There's 7 verses of repetition. As he's speaking, Mullah Abbas, who has gone there with all these tough questions, just from a distance, he starts breathing slowly, and he's just like, "Oh my God, I believe." And he says to Mullah Qasim, his friend, he says, "Look, if you want, you go back to Mullah Muhammad. I'm staying here. I found my Lord." Mullah Qasim says exactly the same. So both these 2 people that are meant to investigate, upon seeing Baha'u'llah, are absolutely blown away. Then they basically say to Baha'u'llah, "Mullah Muhammad, we've told him to come and investigate, but he doesn't want to do this." Baha'u'llah says, "That's no problem. I will go to meet him. You let me know where he is." He says, I'd travel as far as anything to share the message of the Bab with someone. In Sadat Abad, where Mullah Muhammad lives, Baha'u'llah is going to go and visit him.
Desirous of giving effect to his words, Baha'u'llah, accompanied by a number of his companions, proceeded immediately to that village. Mullah Muhammad most ceremoniously received him. "I have not come to this place," Baha'u'llah observed, "to pay you an official or formal visit. My purpose is to enlighten you regarding a new and wondrous message, divinely inspired and fulfilling the promise given to Islam. Whosoever has inclined his ear to this message has felt its irresistible power and has been transformed by the potency of its grace. Tell me whatsoever perplexes your mind or hinders you from recognizing the truth." Mullah Muhammad disparagingly remarked, "I undertake no action unless I first consult the Quran. I have invariably on such occasions followed the practice of invoking the aid of God and his blessing, of opening at random his sacred book, and of consulting the first verse of the particular page upon which mine eyes chance to fall. From the nature of that verse I can judge the wisdom and advisability of my contemplated course of action." Finding that Baha'u'llah was not inclined to refuse him his request, the mujtahid called for a copy of the Quran and opened and closed it again, refusing to reveal the nature of the verse to those who were present. All he said was this: I have consulted the Book of God and deem it inadvisable to proceed further with this matter. A few agreed with him. The rest, for the most part, did not fail to recognize the fear which those words implied. Baha'u'llah, disinclined to cause him further embarrassment, arose and, asking to be excused, bade him a cordial farewell. One day, in the course of one of his riding excursions into the country, Baha'u'llah, accompanied by his companions, saw, seated by the roadside, a lonely youth. His hair was disheveled, and he wore the dress of a dervish. By the side of a brook he had kindled a fire, and was cooking his food and eating it. Approaching him, Baha'u'llah most lovingly inquired, "Tell me, dervish, what is it that you are doing?" "I'm engaged in eating God," he bluntly replied. "I am cooking God, and I am burning him." The unaffected simplicity of his manners and the candor of his replies pleased Baha'u'llah extremely. He smiled at his remark, and began to converse with him in unrestrained tenderness and freedom. Within a short space of time, Baha'u'llah had changed him completely. Enlightened as to the true nature of God, and with a mind purged from the idle fancy of his own people, he immediately recognized the light which that loving stranger had so unexpectedly brought him. That dervish, whose name was Mustafa, became so enamored with the teachings which had been instilled into his mind, that leaving his cooking utensils behind, he straightway arose and followed Baha'u'llah. On foot behind his horse, and inflamed with the fire of his love, he chanted merrily verses of a love song which he had composed on the spur of the moment, and had dedicated to his beloved. "Thou art the day star of guidance," ran its glad refrain. "Thou art the light of truth. Unveil thyself to men, a revealer of the truth." Although in later years, that poem obtained wide circulation among his people, and it became known that a certain dervish surnamed Majzub, and whose name was Mustafa Begis Sanandaji, had without premeditation composed it in praise of his beloved. None seemed to be aware of whom it actually referred, nor did anyone suspect at a time when Baha'u'llah was still veiled from the eyes of men that this dervish alone had recognized his station and discovered his glory.
Mullah Muhammad, the ecclesiastical leader, the Mujtahid of Nur, Baha'u'llah goes and visits him, and he says to him, "Mullah Muhammad, I have come to share the teachings of this promised Qa'im. I've come to share this with you. What exactly would you like to know? I will answer your questions." Mullah Muhammad then starts getting a little bit fidgety. He says, what would I like? Take a seat, by the way. Yeah, just get us a bottle of tea, anything you want, maybe a massa. And Baha'u'llah says, "No, what would you like to know?" He says, "Well, yeah, I could, do you know what? And Baha'u'llah says, "Yes." He says, "Before I decide whether or not I'm going to engage with something, I'd like to get my Quran, and I'm going to flick through it, and whatever page it lands on, I'm going to decide what course of action I should take." This is something that is practiced within Islam and maybe has a space and has a merit, but I'm sensing that Mullah Muhammad isn't doing this because he really wants to search for the truth. I think he's actually terrified of the fact that if this Qa'im has actually come, what happens to his position? And it's very easy for us to look and say, how come he's doing that? We definitely wouldn't. Maybe we would. You're so in love with your faith that people get attached to the outer form of the lamp instead of the light. So he basically says, "Look, this is what I'll do." And he gets his Quran, he opens it up and says, "There we are, cool. No, the Quran says I shouldn't go through with this." Now, it's clear and evident to most of the people there that actually Mullah Muhammad was scared, that he didn't want to do this. And Baha'u'llah realized this. Okay, he wasn't ready to perhaps look into this, to really try and understand whether this thing is true or not. So Baha'u'llah just says, "Okay, well, thank you very much for your hospitality, and I will leave now." We then learn about the story of the dervish, Mustafa, one of my favorite dervishes. As far as dervishes go, every dervish should be called Mustafa, in my opinion. Baha'u'llah is walking by the roadside when all of a sudden he sees this dervish, and he's there, and Baha'u'llah has a little chat with him. And he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I am cooking God, eating God, and I am burning God," as he's stuffing his kebab into his mouth. Very elegantly, quite probably. Baha'u'llah finds this so beautiful, the simplicity of what this man's saying, that how God is in everything and is actually really taken to it. They have a conversation, and the dervish, sure enough, falls in love with Baha'u'llah, so much to the point where he starts following Baha'u'llah as Baha'u'llah's carrying on his journey. He goes along, And there's this song that a lot of the dervishes sing in Iran today, from what I understand. And the song, which Ryan Sabat didn't sing for us, which we're possibly spared, the lyrics are, "Thou art the day star of guidance, and thou art the light of truth. Unveil thyself to men, a revealer of the truth." What a beautiful song, and maybe next time we'll get Mr. Sabat to sing this to us. But this song, which is known very much now, apparently this came from the meeting of Mustafa with Baha'u'llah. We know that Mazindaran as well is where the faith really took off to begin with. Distinguished from all other provinces, this is where Baha'u'llah was, and Baha'u'llah was sharing the message, and it just started to spread like wildfire. Mazindaran becomes one of these centers, and again we have the Battle of Fort Sheikh Tabasi, which takes place in Mazindaran, partly as a reason because of this.
Dave, is there a particular reason why we jumped to this chapter about Baha'u'llah after going through the stuff with Mullah Hussein? It just seemed like a bit of a strange, chapter 4, chapter 5. What's the link there?
So what we had from chapter 4, Baha'u'llah's embraced the cause. The next step in this is once Baha'u'llah embraced the cause, he then goes to Mazandaran to spread the cause. So I think that's the link between the two chapters. But you will find in some other bits, it gets a bit confusing because the chronological order seems to be thrown out somewhat. But this particular bit actually is chronologically in order. The chapter after this is going to be about Mullah Hussein's journey to Khorasan. Khorasan, we know, is this province, the capital of which is Mashhad. So remember, Mullah Hussein was told to go from Shiraz all the way up to Tehran, then to Mashhad, then to Karbala and Najaf. It is on that note, people, I would like to wish you all a very good night, and would like to ask if there's someone out there, or a multitude of people, who would care saying prayers as we go out on this. People from all around the world are joining us, so whoever would like to kick us off, please do so and pray. And I hope you all stay well and safe. AJ, you're looking more and more healthy every time I see you, I must say. He had coronavirus, but he's a champion that's managed to survive and come through. So somebody, please, if you'd kick us off with a prayer.
O God, make me a teacher in thy cause. Cause my mouth to utter the wisdom of thy ways. Make me wise, kind, good, and understanding. Give me the courage of thy martyrs, the patience of thy saints, and the knowledge of thy chosen ones. Make me a fire that will burn through the darkness of man's ignorance. A flag that will fly above his weakness, and a song that will sing and echo through his despairs. Beloved Father, all I can return for this many gifts is a love so great to threaten to tear me in two. I love thee from the innermost core of my soul. I beg for the priceless favor of being allowed to serve thee. All that my heart is crying and my words cannot express, I know thou Heavenly Father understand it. I can say no more. Abdullah.